Welcome to Philanthropy in Action, where we uncover the wonderful stories of people who give their time, talent, and treasure to change the world. These are stories of philanthropy. I'm thrilled to welcome Ellen Gibson McGinnis here today to talk with us about all that she is doing. I'm also thrilled to have our Yale students who will be participating in the conversation. Please introduce yourselves.
My name is Daniel.
My name is Christina.
My name is McLean.
My name is Stephen.
And I'm Claire.
Thank you all for being here today. Ellen, you are a corporate lawyer. You focus on foreign and domestic banks. And yet, given your busy life with your family, you're a mother of 2 children, you find the time to give so much to Yale. You were the chair of the Board of Governors, and now you serve as chairman emeritus, and you also chair Yale Women. How do you do it, and why do you do that?
I can't answer how I do it. It's a deep, dark secret. I can talk a little bit about that. I am compelled to do it. When people ask me why I volunteer for Yale, my historic answer is that somebody asked me. Somebody asked me a long time ago to participate in one Yale activity, and that led me to participate in yet another and another. And I found that as I went through it, the more I engaged with other Yale volunteers, the more I wanted to do it. It's hard to explain, actually.
You know, I asked Julian Bond a similar question. How did he become involved in activism? And he said, because someone asked me.
Yeah.
It's so important to ask. And so now I'm going to ask Daniel.
Sure. What specifically grabs you about alumni issues? And if you dream big, what do you see for the AYA in 5 years or 50 years or something?
Boy, the AYA has come a long way in the last 5 years, and that's a really pertinent question because we are actually looking to see what we're going to be like 5 years from now. What grabs me about alumni issues, I don't think it's any one issue. I think it's how you engage alumni to serve Yale, serve each other, and serve the world. That's really what the AYA is focused on, and that means that we try to engage alumni in the way that they are happiest connecting or they feel passionate about connecting. I see specific programming that we'd be thinking about in the next 5 years, but I think what we want to do is, first of all, inform the alumni population that that's really what we're all about now and try to bring more of them into the fold to do just that. I see really sort of anchoring our gains as far as that. That's a change from how the AYA used to be. So anchoring our gains around that, bringing more people into the fold, and then there's some specific programming, which is probably not what you're asking me.
Sure. Well, then, so what do you sort of understand as like the really, really big picture? 50 years from now, what does the AYA look like? What can you tell us?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think 50 years from now, I think Yale students will understand what the AYA, what their alumni life might look like when they're freshmen. As soon as they walk in the door, they'll see the connection with Yale as a lifelong thing. And that's really what we're trying to do with the AYA. I think that's going to take a lot of time, but that's really the goal. To see yourself from the beginning as someone who has this relationship with other Yaleys and with the university that helps inform how you act in the world for a lifetime.
Ellen, could you explain why you think that's important?
Well, I think Yale is a place that, and I think this may be partly self-selection, Yale is a place that tends to, when they say Yale actually states that it wants to train global leaders, okay? And we're not just talking about people to lead corporations or law firms. And I think Yale actually attracts a person who's interested in being a leader in every aspect of his or her life, and giving back is a really big part of that. It's incredible to me when I talk to other alums and we talk about what we've done at the AYA recently to go beyond your, what class are you in or what region do you live in. People are so attracted to that idea because it resonates with them. It resonates with Yaleys, the notion of giving back, and giving back in lots of different ways. And I wasn't intentional about that. I wouldn't have been able to answer this question in the same way when I started. When someone just asked me, I did it because I thought, well, it'll be fun to hang out with Yaleys. But now I see that that's really a common thread that people respond to and act on.
Well, I know McLean is dying to get in on this conversation.
Yeah, I'm actually really interested in your philanthropy with Yale and how you've worked with the AYA, because I'm just recently working with AYA as well for the reunions at the end of this semester. So I'm really interested in that organization. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about your involvement with Yale Women. And I'm actually involved in several women's organizations here on campus. One is a Greek organization, and another one is the Women's Leadership Conference and Women's Leadership here at Yale. And I was wondering, I don't know a lot about Yale Women, and I'd really like to find out more about that. So, what kinds of philanthropic efforts have you been involved with Yale Women?
Well, Yale Women is very new. We just launched it in December. So we don't have any specific philanthropic efforts that have come out of the organization. But Yale Women I see as, it's almost like a mini AYA when you think about it. There are 50,000 Yale Women alums and across the world, and from the graduate school, the professional school, graduate school, professional schools, and the college. And we have a strategic plan, which you can read, which talks about this piece that you're talking about, philanthropy, giving back. One of our pillars is contribution. Two of them are actually contributions to society and contributions to Yale. And I find that the women, this group has come out of a number of years of people feeling like we needed to have a women's group, because in a way, it's the same thing I talked about before. When I get together with other Yale women, it's interesting and stimulating and exciting, and we just love conversing with each other no matter what class we're in. In terms of age group or society or profession. So in a way, it seems self-serving, It's, what do we get out of this? We get out of this real enjoyment of being together. But the same common themes seem to arise in terms of what people want to do. They want to give back. We want to mentor Yale students. We want to mentor other alums. We're interested in lifelong learning. We do want to develop ways to be philanthropic ourselves, to partner with other nonprofit organizations, to give back to our communities. So building community, that's another one of our pillars, actually. So it's very exciting. We're very much in the startup phase of it. But, and what year did you say you were at Yale?
I'm a sophomore.
Okay, so you're already a member, because if you've been in a degree program at Yale for one semester, you're considered an alum. So you're all alums,
great.
And you're already a member of Yale Women.
I was going to ask you as well, how do you integrate the younger population of Yale Women, and how can my friends and I get involved?
Well, we have a committee on campus partnerships. We're already looking to look to the students and to and other campus organizations. Actually, probably some of the other people you work with in your organizations are aware of us and have started working with us. It's the same. It's part of my answer before. What we'd like to do is make people aware that we exist. Do some work while you're on campus, maybe when you're home for spring break or in the summertime. Get involved with whatever's in your region, and part of it is an awareness that when you come out after senior year, if you're already aware of all the alumni opportunities, we're much more likely to get you involved, which is really the answer to your question.
I think that's really great. Just the last point is that we spoke with Donna Dubinsky last week, and she's also an alum of Yale and in Branford College, I believe. And she was saying that I was asking her why she decided to donate to Yale and why that's important to her, and she said that it's important because she almost owes something back to Yale because they supported her, and she was gained a lot, and she is where she is today because of Yale. So I think that's interesting in empowering Yale women in order to give back to Yale and also build up the experiences and opportunities for Yale women today.
I mean, I think that is part of the core of how we feel, is that we were privileged to be here, and we owe society for that privilege, and that's part of where the impetus for giving back comes from.
Christina?
Hi, thank you so much for coming today. What I find really fascinating about your philanthropy is that you give to encourage other people also to give back to Yale. And we've talked in this series with philanthropists who give to build schools or to foment civil rights movements, but your giving is different in that special way. So what are some methods that you've used to try to have people to give back to Yale, and what are some difficulties you've encountered in that?
Well, let me parse it a little bit, because one of the things that I think about when I was first asked to participate was, this is a way I can give back, because at the time I didn't have a lot of money, but I can give my time and talent to help. At that time, it was the local Yale Club. So I think that in a way, it's easy for me to get people to, it's easier to ask people to give time and talent than money. I find it easier, and it's usually easier to get a response. Right. So what we'll do with Yale Women as an example, or even the AYA, is to try to get people involved, as I was talking about before, with something that they're passionate about. Say, this is an opportunity for you to come back and meet other Yaleys, to get engaged in that way, to get intellectual stimulation when you come back to campus, to revisit your college experience. I mean, that's sort of a hook that seems very selfish. But in the process, you become involved in an organization that actually leads to some of the other things that you're talking about. I mean, things that are happening in the alumni world through the support of the AYA, and I hope will happen with Yale Women, are building schools, helping, in education, in the arts, you name it that somebody's interested in doing, we can help generate those activities through bringing Yaleys together. I think the biggest challenge is really getting the word out about it, is making people understand. There's some famous stories about, I won't go into the details, but when alums get communication from Yale, most of them assume they're being asked for money. And we don't ask for money. We ask for time and talent. We ask for ideas. I think the hardest challenge is to get the alumni world to understand that that's what we're there for, is to create relationships and to help connect them back to the university.
Right. So on the topic of creating these relationships, what are some examples of successful programming that help to maintain these communities outside of Yale for people who may have been in different class years they've never met before? How does that factor into maintaining and gluing these communities together?
Well, the one that comes to mind quickest is the Yale Service Corps. One of our initiatives in the last 5 years was to have this Yale Service Corps, which now has its own sort of sub-board of the AYA, who started out with a project going to the Dominican Republic over spring break 4 years ago, maybe, to partner with an organization down there to work in the community. And what's fascinating about that is there was an email sent out from Yale to ask people to go on the trip. It had the word service in the subject line. And I cannot tell you how many people, I think about 100 people went on the trip, but a huge percentage of them had never done anything in connection with Yale before. And some of these were people who graduated in the 60s. And they said they only opened the email because they saw the word service. And they thought it was such a great idea to go with other Yaleys, and some of them took families to the Dominican Republic to do this service project, that they joined up. And they have since, a lot of them have since become very, very involved, and we've had many, many trips since then. But I think, again, it's broadening the way you think about how alumni interact with each other and the world. There are a lot of universities who don't get this. They say, well, why would I want to partner with Habitat for Humanity and bring my XYZ college alums to do that? What do I get out of it? And our question is not, what do I get out of it? It's what can I bring to it? And it's a hard question. I mean, is there such a thing as altruism? I get a lot out of this. I almost feel guilty because I do this because I enjoy it so much, and I get to meet fabulous people like Maxim and interact with students. But I think there's something beyond that just, but you try to, we've appealed to that and brought into the AYA fold actively people who didn't have time for it before or didn't think they cared.
Let me put you on the spot. When a lot of the world hears Yale, they think privilege, they think elite, they think it has so much more resources vis-a-vis any other entity. Why invest in this?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I think that I'm going to answer it with my actual fundraising hat on, because I also do some fundraising for Yale as a member of the class of '82. What I tell people when I have to go out as a class agent and ask them to give is Yale is doing a tremendous amount in the world that I don't think people realize. It's not just the impact of students like you who will go off in the world and do amazing things. It's incredible what the students of today are doing in their own community and globally. It's not just what you will do with your intellect when you go on to your job in whatever sector you have it in the future. It's not just the knowledge that comes out of New Haven. They're doing projects all over the world. There's scientific projects, finding that fern in Africa that's going to be the next wonder drug. We're doing nursing projects in China. We're helping to teach the Chinese universities about a liberal arts education, which is going to have ripple effects for the education of people in that part of the world. There is so much that Yale is doing, and Yale is a rich institution. But what it's doing with that is it's being a not just a thought leader, but having an actual impact in the world that I don't think people really think about, and I think that's worth supporting. And again, people say, well, I'm just supporting kids to come to school in New Haven. It's only 5,000 of them, or
Right.
10,000 if you count the graduate schools. That's not what it's about. It's a catalyst for a lot of other really important things in the world, I think.
Stephen.
So you mentioned impact, and I find that attempting to maximize impact is a large draw for me in trying to decide what to do with my present or future time, talent, and treasure. Do you think that such a metric is appropriate in some, all, or no circumstances?
I think it's hard to measure sometimes, but I think it's very appropriate. When you talk about how do you measure the impact of dollars, it's somewhat easier to do. If I as a fundraiser do X, Y, and Z, I will get, A, B, and C dollars. When you try to measure the impact of human capital, which is what we're talking about, it's difficult. But I think it's really important, partly because if we think that the donation of time and talent is important, then it would be good to be able to measure it to show the impact. It's something we struggle with. Metrics is something we struggle with at the AYA because we think what we do is important, and we know that it leads to stronger connections and many times to giving. You engage somebody more in any kind of organization, but with Yale, and they see part of what I was just talking about. Or they see what a fabulous place it is just locally on campus and what kind of opportunity it's providing for people who will go out and make an impact in the world. They are more likely to give, and that's important too. But I think it's a really good question, but it's hard to figure out how to do it.
Okay, so even human capital aside, dollar for dollar, do you think donations to Yale can compare in impact to donations, say, to bed nets covering children in Africa who are dying from malaria?
Yes, I do. I think that, personally, I choose a couple of select causes that I give my money to beyond Yale. I do give to Yale financially. And it's probably important to support if there's something that you're very interested in that you see. That's a great example of something that's got a low cost and a high impact itself. And I think that's important. But what I would say about Yale is Yale can often, it's almost like basic research, of course, which goes on here. I'm very interested in maintaining financing for basic research beyond the what will it do for me. In a way, I don't care what the impact is, right? Because most of what we've learned in medicine over the last 100 years has come from people doing basic research where they had no idea where it was going. So I would say that that's Yale. I think that Yale is doing specific projects you can point to and go, I really like that they're doing that they're educating the Chinese educators. But on the other hand, I think they're also doing things that are inspiring thought. They are also doing basic research, not just in the sciences, but in other areas. And it's important to support this kind of institution, and I support this one because it's where I went. Does that answer the question a bit?
I think so.
Claire?
So thus far we've talked about two different ways that you've persuaded alumni to give back in their time, in committing to service, and also in their treasure in donating to Yale. I wonder, is there a difference in the way that you ask for those two different kinds of philanthropy? Do you change the way that you approach the issue, change the way that you send out contact information? Does it vary at all?
It does, and I have to say, I think I'm really bad at fundraising. It's not something I like to do. I signed up to be a class agent because I'm married to a classmate, and someone came to me and said, okay, we've got about 12 couples who are married to each other in our class. Would you be the people who go out and ask them for money? So I'm actually asking people in a similarly situated, and some of whom I know. I'm very perfunctory about it. I don't do a good job. So, when I do engage in the conversation, I have the conversation I talked about before. some people are much better at that, and I'm passionate about the cause. And actually, as I've been more involved with Yale, it's much easier for me to ask for money because I can talk about the things I just talked about. I can talk about the reasons why I think it's important that have impact. But it's much different. It's so easy to ask someone. You know, the person who asked me just called me up and said, you know, I lived in Dallas at the time, you've been in Dallas for a year, we've got this Yale Club, we need somebody to do the vice president of programming, will you do it? You know, and it's saying, oh, that, first of all, that makes you feel good, right? Will you do this job? I'll give you a title, you know? It's easy to ask people, I think, to do something, something with time and talent, especially because you can also frame it and say, all I need is you know, this many hours on this one project. Or I need you to commit to get on a path to do what I've done and spend 14 years, you know, engaged in a real way. But I think, and you have the commonality of Yale, of course, with the latter, even more easily than for money. It's easy to say, hey, you know, we already have this connection. That's why I'm talking to you in the first place. People tend to want to be involved if they can see what it's going to look like, you know. So I think it's very different.
So actually, related to commonality, I read the article that you published in the Yale Alumni magazine, The Call for Service.
Right.
And one of the things that you suggested was that individual or alumni should donate to groups that they were associated with while they were on campus, either the political union or Yale Women, groups that they identify with. What role do you think that identity plays in asking alums to give back, either in time or in treasure?
Well, I think that's what we've discovered is very important. Because it used to be that at the AYA, we had classes and clubs, regional clubs, and then graduate professional school affiliation. And frankly, we were much more focused on the classes and clubs. It was a much more Yale College-oriented organization. And there were people who loved that. I was very involved with my class, and I love my classmates, and I come back to reunions, and that's great. I got involved in a regional club because somebody asked me to. But we were leaving out a lot of people. We were leaving out people who didn't feel as though that they fit in because of their actual identity, their racial identity or their religious identity, or something that was more definable about them that you could maybe see or understand when you interacted with them, and people who wanted to connect because they were in a singing group or they were with the political union. I think part of what we're doing is, instead of imposing a way to connect on people, is saying, how do you want to connect? How do you want to be involved? What were you passionate about when you were here at Yale? We can find, you know, would you be interested in helping us find a way for you to connect back through that passion? And it's been very successful. We have what we call the shared interest groups, which reflect both the sort of interest and identity that people have. And there's over 100 of them. It's really, it's almost more than we can handle because people responded so to that. So I think that makes the difference.
On that, when you bring first your time and talent, and now your treasure, to this institution and to the other organizations that you support, are you also bringing a vision of what you would like Yale to do, or what you would like the role to be for this catalyst, if Yale is a catalyst in the world? Or are you more of a passive investor in whatever it is the organization is doing?
Well, I actually think that when I give money, it's probably the latter. Mm-hmm. That I got tired of giving $10 here and there every time somebody asked me for something. So I decided to really direct it. And I looked for things that looked for organizations I thought were doing a really great job at something that I cared about. And because I think they're doing a really great job, I will give them my money and, you know, let them do whatever they need to do with it. And that includes Yale in terms of my Yale giving, actually. Occasionally I'll direct it within the university. I used to always, in fact, I still do direct my sort of annual, you know, sort of basic level of giving to financial aid. You can do that when you give your, that's one of the boxes you can check. And then for my reunion gift, I gave it to the new library. You know, so there were specific things that I thought, that's great, I want to support that thing. But I think in terms of the time, again, there is this sort of loop that gets created of positive feedback to me, and then me keeping engaged with it. And because of the role that I've had, being on the board, as you know, and then being the chair, I've had a lot of ability to direct what we do at the AYA. So, you know, I'm not sure what my vision is for the future, but I think I was able to help get to where we are now through having a vision when I started out. Partly it was seeing deficits, but partly it was being able to visualize the, you know, what we could become. And it's a lot about this connection, and that we really could get people to engage if we let them tell us how.
Right.
Okay, well, so you've mentioned already that this is fun for you. This feels good. This is it's compelling. You can't stop. So I guess, do you think, is that when philanthropy is at its most effective? Is when it's not even some sort of sacrifice. It's sort of this idea of enlightened self-interest. You want to give. Is that when it's at its best?
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely do. And I think that's the interesting thing about the time, talent versus fundraising. That I expect you could potentially have that feeling if you gave enough money or to the right thing and had the right effect. But it's very clear to me that everybody that I work with as a Yale volunteer at the AYA, Yale Women, and other places has that, you know, enlightened self-interest, positive feedback loop going on, which makes it easy to keep doing it. Yeah.
One of the things that we are discovering about people who are active in philanthropy is how that philanthropy turns on interesting things like gender, like region, like religious background. Did you ever attend religious school?
I did not, but I grew up in a very religious, you know, Catholic family with very devout parents. Not extreme in any way, but very, you know, very steadily devout, went to church every Sunday. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because one of the causes I support came out of my church experience.
Which one?
Covenant House.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you guys know Covenant House? The original founder of Covenant House came to my church when I was 13 years old and was the guest person to give a sermon, and talked about Covenant House, which is, at the time, was just in New York, which is a place where runaway children could come and be taken in and sometimes reconnect with their families and sometimes not, but taken in and cared for and clothed. And now they do job training and all kinds of things, and they're in many cities. And I was 13 years old. This made such an impression on me. I started giving money when I was 13 to this cause. And that is one of the ones that I have kept as a defined cause that I try to support in some significant way. So I don't know how that ties in. I mean, obviously there was a religious component to that. There was a feeling of helping people less fortunate than myself, and understanding that that was part of what I was supposed to do. But it was, even now I can almost remember the sort of emotional connection that made me say, I want to do something about that.
Now, Covenant House, I use this by way of explaining how you've stayed connected. Now, Covenant House has had a rocky road for a little bit.
Yes.
As Yale has had, and any organization goes through. How did you, and why did you stay with them, or stay with Yale, or through the hard times? Why do you do that?
Well, because I think in that particular instance, the mission of the organization and the work of the organization was clear. The mission was clear and important, and the work of the organization was going to go on in spite of the difficulties that they had with the leadership. Mm-hmm. They were going to get the right new leaders, and they did, in fact, get the right new leaders to continue this mission. I suppose if I were there inside the walls of that organization at the time, I might have wondered whether it was going to survive. But as an outsider, I thought it's almost more important for me to continue to support them, because they probably will have less support because of the things that go on. And with Yale as well, with Yale I actually I haven't been so involved in a time when I thought that there was a problem. There have been lots of issues that have come out, publicly about things that Yale gets criticized for, but I've been, in a way, on the inside. I know the people in the administration, and I can see what's going on and how they react as people to some of the things that go on, and I see the good faith and what I feel is a real commitment to the right values. Okay. So probably part of the effect of my being able to be involved at this level and give this time and talent is that I also am able to see, it's almost like politics, right? You see that you can spend enough time to figure out what's really going on and examine the nuances and not react to a superficiality about a situation. So I think it's important, really in both cases, focusing on what's really happening and what the mission is and what you want to help them accomplish. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. Makes a lot of sense.
So.
Well, Ellen, I have a couple more questions for you, but first I just wanted to ask, you did mention the Covenant House and also Yale that you philanthropically give to, but what other organizations do you support?
Oh gosh, you're putting me on the spot. I support my children's educational institutions because they're both actually in a private educational institution. I support, I'm drawing a blank. There's one other that I give significant money to every year, and I forgot what it is.
No, that's great. Well, I can.
But it's targeted. I mean, it's really what I consider to be a significant amount of money to 3 or 4 organizations, and I still will support friends who are doing the polar bear plunge, to raise support for their favorite thing. Occasionally, so it's not like I don't give any money to anything else. But I really feel like it's better to have a bigger impact in a place by giving more to fewer things.
I think that's really interesting because as a class we're dealing with which organization are we going to support, and I think it's really interesting that you support the Covenant House that has had its ups and downs, and also Yale, which is a huge organization that receives a lot of money each year. And I know Stephen touched on this a little bit, but what advice do you have for us as a class that is, looking into huge organizations, but also looking locally into small organizations like the Columbus House, that is, that's in, not the Covenant House, but it's around New Haven, and it's a smaller organization. But we're also looking at Against Malaria Foundation, which is in Africa, that is a huge organization that supports a lot of children. So what advice do you have for us?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to make those decisions. Well, I think it's useful to think about what your mission is. I think for me, I decided that I would pick a couple of things that I wanted to promote. They're mostly in the education-related area, although Covenant House isn't exactly in that. I don't know. I think it's a really hard question because you have to decide: are you going to support something that has a broad reach and a broad impact, but maybe not as high an impact necessarily, or you're going to support something that has a real focus and is in your own community? This is a real debate. Do you support something across the ocean? Do you support something next door? We have this debate for Yale Service. Do we do all of our trips abroad, or should we start doing trips in the U.S.? There's so much to be done. The better question might be: can you develop some kind of philosophy or mission that you can stick to? That's really, and you're in a sort of unique situation. You're not an organization that's going to go on for a long time with this. So I think it is very difficult. But I do actually think that, I don't know if you have the option of giving a little bit of money to a lot of different things. I do think that a lot of money to a small 1 or 2 organizations probably has more of an impact.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Well, Ellen, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your time and talent
You're
today.
welcome. I'm so happy to do it.
With our students. And thank you, students, for those really searing questions of our guest, Ellen Gibson McGinnis, the Chairman Emeritus of the Yale Board of Governors. It has been wonderful doing today's program on philanthropy in action. Ellen shared with us how important it is to be passionate in supporting organizations that are making a difference. And I ask you, what are you doing to change the world?